The massive crystal chamber buzzed with alien voices as 47 different species argued about humanity's fate. Ambassador Hyunwoo Park sat quietly in his chair, watching the chaos unfold around him. He had seen this coming for months. The Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Prime was beautiful in its own way. Massive crystal walls stretched up into darkness, and holographic displays showed voting results in dozens of alien languages. But today the beauty felt cold to Hyunwoo. Today, everything would change. Chancellor Vexthul, a tall reptilian creature with golden scales, raised his clawed hand for silence. His voice echoed through the chamber's translation system. The vote is final. 43 species have voted to remove humanity's voting rights. Only 4 voted against this decision. Hyunwoo felt Captain Yoonji Kim shift behind him. She commanded the human security team and had served in 3 wars before becoming a diplomat's guard. Her hand moved slightly toward her weapon, but Hyunwoo raised his own hand just a little. Not yet. Humans will be given observer status, the Chancellor continued. You may watch our meetings, but you cannot vote. Your technologies will become galactic property for the good of all species. Dr. Taemin Lee, the human science advisor, whispered quietly into Hyunwoo's ear. They want our shield generators, our medical scanners, our computer systems. Everything we built. For 30 years, humans had served on this council. They had stopped wars before they started. They had built space stations and fixed broken computers. When the Kaldorian traders fought with the mechanoid workers, humans found ways to make both sides happy. When the outer colonies needed food, humans organized supply runs. When alien children got sick with diseases their doctors couldn't cure, human medical teams saved them. But the other species had grown tired of human solutions. They said humans were too practical, too direct. They complained that humans didn't follow proper diplomatic protocols. They whispered that humans advanced too quickly and made other species look slow. Prime Designate Morhan, an ancient crystal being older than most civilizations, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. Humans have served well, but the galaxy has outgrown the need for such aggressive problem-solving. Hyunwoo almost laughed. Aggressive? Humans had prevented more wars than they had ever fought, but he kept his face calm as he stood up slowly. The chamber fell silent. 47 species watched him, expecting him to beg or argue or make promises. Some looked guilty. Others looked satisfied. A few looked worried, though they probably didn't know why yet. The Human Federation, Hyunwoo said clearly, formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then chaos erupted. You cannot leave, Chancellor Vexthul hissed. The vote can be changed. We can discuss terms. Wait, called Counselor Nalresh, an insect-like being who had always been fair to humans. Let us reconsider. But Hyunwoo was already gathering his papers. Captain Kim had moved to the door, signaling the security team. Dr. Lee was quietly downloading files from his personal computer. Research data, crisis reports, system maintenance schedules that only humans knew how to read. Ambassador Park, Prime Designate Morhan's crystal form shimmered with distress. Surely we can negotiate. Hyunwoo looked at the ancient being. Morhan had lived for 3,000 years and seen a dozen civilizations rise and fall, but even he didn't understand what was happening. The galaxy has made its choice, Hyunwoo said. Now it will live with the consequences. He walked toward the exit, his team following. Behind him, alien voices rose in panic and confusion. Some demanded they stop. Others tried to bargain. A few still insisted that humanity was bluffing. As they reached the door, General Korthak of the militaristic Bruthan species called out, Good. We don't need human interference anyway. Hyunwoo paused and looked back one last time. He saw Chancellor Vexthul's golden scales pale with worry. He saw Morhan's crystal body flickering with uncertain light. He saw dozens of species who had no idea what they had just done. General, Hyunwoo said quietly, I hope you remember those words in 6 months. The human delegation walked out of the council chamber for the last time. 2 hours later, human ships began leaving Nexus Prime. The massive diplomatic station had been humanity's second home for 3 decades. Human engineers had upgraded its power systems. Human doctors had staffed its medical centers. Human technicians had maintained its computer networks. Now they were all leaving. Captain Kim stood on the bridge of the human flagship, watching Nexus Prime shrink in the distance. Orders, Ambassador? Hyunwoo stared at the station's lights growing smaller. Somewhere in there, 47 species were starting to realize what they had lost. Not the human votes or human opinions. Those had never mattered much anyway. They had lost the humans who fixed things when they broke. The humans who found solutions when problems seemed impossible. The humans who worked quietly in the background, making sure the galaxy kept running smoothly. Set course for the outer rim, Hyunwoo said. We have colonies to build and a new future to create. What about them? Dr. Lee asked, pointing back toward the station. Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. He thought about all the crises that would come. Trade disputes, system failures, medical emergencies, natural disasters. For 30 years, humans had handled these problems so efficiently that other species forgot they existed. Now they would remember. They wanted to be free of human interference. Hyunwoo said finally, "Let's see how they do without human help." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind the Galactic Council and 47 species who had no idea their comfortable, stable galaxy was about to come apart at the seams. In his quarters, Dr. Lee looked at the files he had downloaded. Crisis management protocols, infrastructure maintenance schedules, early warning systems for natural disasters, communication network backup procedures, all the unglamorous, invisible work that kept a galaxy of trillions alive and safe. Work that humans had been doing quietly, efficiently without recognition or thanks. Work that would stop happening tomorrow morning. 3 months had passed since the humans left, and Admiral So Young Choi watched the galaxy burn from her command ship in the Outer Rim. The first crisis started small, as they always did. The Kaldorian hegemony accused the Mechanoid Collective of stealing trade routes. The Mechanoids said the Kaldorians were charging unfair prices. In the old days, human mediators would have fixed this in 3 days with a simple compromise. Instead, the Galactic Council spent 2 weeks arguing about which committee should handle the dispute. By then, Kaldorian warships were shooting at Mechanoid cargo vessels. "Admiral," reported Commander Junho Nam from the communications station, "we're receiving distress signals from the Kepler system. The fighting has spread there." So Young kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt a familiar anger. "Any request for assistance?" 17 different messages, ma'am. The Kaldorians want us to stop the Mechanoids. The Mechanoids want us to stop the Kaldorians. 3 neutral systems want us to mediate. Our response? The same as always. The Human Federation does not interfere in council space. So Young nodded. President Shin had been very clear about this policy. Humanity would help any species that formally requested assistance and was willing to leave council space. But they would not save people who had chosen to live under council rule. The war was just the beginning. Engineer Dong Hyun Yoon had been tracking infrastructure failures across the galaxy. His reports made for depressing reading. 15 orbital habitats have experienced life support failures this month, he told Dr. Haijin Kang during their daily briefing. The council is sending repair teams, but they don't understand human engineering. Haijin studied the reports on her tablet. She specialized in galactic ecosystems and had spent years working with alien species. What about the hyperspace beacons? Worse. The navigation network has degraded by 30%. Ships are getting lost. Trade routes are becoming dangerous, and the council doesn't have technicians who can fix the guidance systems. Heejin frowned. Didn't we leave maintenance manuals? We left everything. But reading instructions and actually understanding complex systems are different things. These beacons use adaptive AI that learns from experience. Only human engineers knew how to teach them properly. The communication networks were failing too. The galaxy's quantum communication system had been designed to route messages automatically around damaged or busy nodes. But the routing algorithms needed constant adjustment as political situations changed. Human technicians had been making these adjustments for decades. Now messages were taking days to travel distances they used to cross in hours. Some systems were completely cut off from galactic communications. Back on Nexus Prime, Chancellor Vexthul was learning what real crisis management looked like without humans. How long until the repair teams reach the Vegan colonies? He demanded. His aide, a nervous-looking amphibian, checked his data pad. The Council Logistics Committee is still debating which species should provide the transport ships. The Aquatic Relations Subcommittee says it should be handled by water-breathing species, since the colonies are mostly ocean worlds. The Atmospheric Committee disagrees. Vexthul's golden scales darkened with frustration. People are dying. The habitat domes are failing. Yes, Chancellor, but proper procedures must be followed. In the old days, human emergency teams would have been on their way to Vega within hours of the first distress call. They wouldn't have waited for committees to decide which species had the right body type for the job. Counselor Narration tried a different approach. The insectoid being had always respected human efficiency, and she was starting to understand why. She organized a private delegation to human space, hoping to convince them to return. Admiral Choi received them on her flagship with cold politeness. Counselor Narration, she said formally, what brings you to human territory? Admiral, the galaxy needs human expertise. These infrastructure failures, the trade war, the communication breakdowns. Surely we can find a solution. The solution is simple, Admiral Choi replied. The Council voted to remove humanity from galactic affairs. We respected that decision, but people are suffering. Yes, they are. Admiral Choi's voice was calm but hard. And whose fault is that? Nalresh's compound eyes reflected the lights of the human ship. The vote was a mistake. Many of us realize that now. Then convince your colleagues to change it. Some species refuse to admit error. General Korthak of the Bruthen still claims the galaxy is better off without human interference. Admiral Choi almost smiled at that. The general is welcome to his opinion, but opinions don't fix broken life support systems. The delegation returned to Council space empty-handed. General Korthak responded to their report by declaring that Bruthen engineers could handle any crisis. He organized a task force to repair the failing systems. The first Bruthen repair mission was a disaster. They tried to fix a water recycling plant on Europa Station using their own technology. The plant exploded, contaminating the station's water supply and forcing the evacuation of 50,000 beings. But even that wasn't the worst failure. Engineer Yoon was monitoring galactic infrastructure from human space when his computers detected something alarming. Admiral, he called across the command center. We have a major problem developing in the Centauri Junction. Admiral Choi looked at his displays. The Centauri Junction was one of the galaxy's most important hyperspace crossroads. 15 major trade routes met there, and the navigation systems required constant maintenance to handle the complex gravitational interactions. The hyperspace beacon is showing stress fractures, Yoon reported. The quantum field generators are overheating. If that junction fails, how long do we have? Days, maybe hours. The backup systems are already failing. Admiral Choi stared at the readouts. 15 systems depended on that junction for everything from food supplies to medical equipment. If it collapsed, those systems would be cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Any word from the Council? They don't even know there's a problem. The monitoring systems were maintained by human technicians, and the new Council teams don't understand the warning signs. So Young faced the hardest decision of her career. She could save 15 star systems with millions of people by sending human repair teams to fix the junction, but doing so would violate President Shin's direct orders about non-interference. She made her choice. The Centauri Junction collapsed 6 hours later. 15 star systems suddenly found themselves isolated from galactic civilization. Their economies began crashing immediately as trade stopped and supply lines were cut. On Nexus Prime, Chancellor Vexthul received the news with growing horror. How many people are trapped in those systems? Approximately 40 million beings across 15 worlds, his aide reported. And there's no way to reach them. Not unless we can rebuild the junction. But our engineers estimate it would take 5 years and resources we don't have. Vexthul slumped in his chair. 40 million people, cut off from the galaxy because the Council had been too proud to keep human engineers on staff. For the first time, he began to understand what Ambassador Park had meant about consequences. 1 year after humanity's departure, President Jaewon Shin stood in his office on New Terra, watching reports from across the galaxy. What had started as a simple trade dispute was now a full-scale war involving 12 species. Dr. Min Ho Bae, his crisis management specialist, updated him on the latest developments. The Kaldorian mechanoid conflict has drawn in their allies. The Aquatic League is fighting the Crystal Confederation. 3 mining consortiums have declared independence, and the Bruthen fleet is moving toward the core systems. Casualties? President Shin asked. Conservative estimates put the death toll at 200 million beings across 47 star systems. Shin closed his eyes. In the old days, Human negotiators would have stopped this before it reached 1,000 casualties. They had a gift for finding solutions that made everyone feel like they had won something. But the galaxy had decided it didn't need human problem-solving anymore. Commander Narai Lim entered the office. Still wearing her environmental suit from her latest rescue mission, she led the special operations teams that extracted human civilians and refugees from the chaos of Council space. "Mr. President," she said, "I've just returned from the Vegan colonies. The situation there is getting worse. How bad?" 3 of the 5 colony domes have lost life support completely. The survivors are living in emergency shelters, but they won't last much longer. The Council sent Bruthan engineers to help, but they made the problems worse. Shin wasn't surprised. The Bruthans were excellent warriors but terrible engineers. They approached every problem like an enemy to be defeated rather than a puzzle to be solved. "Any requests for evacuation to human space?" 50,000 applications this week alone. "Mostly families with children," Shin nodded. "Approve them all." "We have room." This was happening across the galaxy. As Council space became more dangerous and unstable, millions of beings were fleeing to human territory. The refugees discovered something interesting. Human colonies offered better living conditions, more stable governments, and greater opportunities than most species' homeworlds. Dr. Bay pulled up a holographic display showing refugee statistics. "We've accepted 4 million beings in the past year. They're integrating well into human society. Better than they did in Council space. Much better. Turns out that human tolerance for diversity isn't just diplomatic politeness. We actually mean it." Many alien species were shocked to discover that humans didn't just tolerate differences, they celebrated them. Human colonies welcomed alien art, alien food, alien ideas. Mixed species communities were thriving in human space while the galaxy outside tore itself apart. But the infrastructure crisis was getting worse. Elder Quintal, one of the galaxy's oldest beings, had been researching Council records in the archives of Nexus Prime. What he found disturbed him deeply. The ancient Cerebrian brought his findings to what remained of the Council leadership. Chancellor Vexthul and a handful of other officials listened in growing horror as Quintal read his report. "According to Council records," the Elder said in his whispering voice, "human intervention prevented an average of 47 major crises per year. Natural disasters, diplomatic incidents, economic collapses, terrorist attacks, system failures." 47? Vexthul repeated weakly. The number increased each year as the galaxy became more complex and interconnected. Last year, humans prevented 63 potential catastrophes that could have killed millions. Director Harnock of the Aquatic Thalassians raised a tentacle. "What kinds of crises?" Quintal consulted his datapad. "Solar flare warnings that prevented evacuation disasters. Trade negotiations that stopped wars before they started. Computer virus outbreaks that were contained before they spread. Asteroid impacts that were detected and prevented. Medical epidemics that were stopped with human vaccines." The room fell silent. None of them had realized how much work humans had been doing behind the scenes. "There's more," Quintal continued. "Humans maintained early warning systems for cosmic threats. Solar storms, gravitational anomalies, approaching comets. Without human monitoring, he didn't need to finish. They all understood. Commander Lim was leading another evacuation mission when the first major cosmic disaster struck. Her ships were removing refugees from a failing space station when her sensors detected something unusual. "Commander," reported Lieutenant C. June Park, "I'm reading massive electromagnetic interference from the galactic core. Something big is happening." Lim checked her instruments. "Get me a connection to Dr. Wan on New Terra." Scientist Ji-Hoon Wan answered immediately from his laboratory. "Commander, we're detecting it too. It's a solar storm from the central black hole region. Massive scale." "How massive?" "Big enough to fry electronic systems across 17 star systems. The radiation front will reach populated areas in 6 hours." Lim felt cold. "Do the Council systems have warning?" "No. The early warning network was maintained by human astrophysicists. The Council doesn't even know it's coming." Lim faced an impossible choice. She could break protocol and warn the Council systems, potentially saving millions of lives. Or she could follow orders and let the disaster happen. She chose to follow orders. The solar storm hit 17 systems like an invisible hammer. Electronic systems died instantly. Power grids collapsed. Life support systems failed. Communication networks went dark. On planets with atmospheres, the populations could survive for days or weeks, but space stations and orbital habitats began dying immediately. The disaster killed 4 billion beings in less than 24 hours. Nexus Prime itself was damaged. The massive diplomatic station lost half its power, and several sections had to be evacuated. The council chamber's crystal walls cracked, and the holographic displays flickered and died. Chancellor Vexthul stood in the damaged chamber, looking at the dead screens and broken crystal. This was supposed to be the center of galactic civilization. Now it looked like a ruin. Director Harnock emerged from the emergency meeting with terrible news. The casualty reports are coming in. 4 billion confirmed dead. Another billion missing. 57 space stations completely destroyed. Could we have prevented this? According to the Human Archives, yes. They had protocols for solar storm warnings, emergency evacuations, radiation shielding procedures. None of our current staff knew these systems existed. Vexthul sank into his chair. 4 billion beings dead because the council had been too proud to keep human experts on staff. But the worst news was yet to come. Elder Quintal appeared in the damaged chamber, his ancient form trembling with fear. Chancellor, we have discovered something in the Human Archives. A threat assessment from 3 years ago. What kind of threat? External. From beyond the galaxy. Quintal activated an emergency holodisplay that still worked. Human deep space monitors detected anomalous signals from the void between galaxies. Movement patterns suggesting massive artificial structures. The humans classified it as a potential extinction-level threat. Vexthul stared at the display. Where is this threat now? According to the human calculations, approximately 2 years from the galactic rim. But without their monitoring systems, we have no way to track its approach. The Chancellor realized with growing horror that the galaxy's collapse might have attracted attention from something far worse than civil war, something that had been waiting in the dark between stars, something that was coming to finish what they had started. 2 years after humanity left the Council, Fleet Admiral Kyung-Soo An received the first confirmed contact report with something that should not exist. Captain Min-Jun Lee of the patrol ship Resilience had been running a routine mission near the galactic rim when his sensors detected something impossible. Ships of unknown design, massive beyond anything in recorded history, moving through the empty space between galaxies. Admiral, Captain Lee reported via quantum communicator. These vessels are enormous. The smallest one is larger than our biggest space station. They're heading directly toward our galaxy, and they're not responding to any communication attempts. Admiral An studied the sensor data on his command ship. The alien vessels showed technology that made even human engineering look primitive. Their hulls seemed to bend space around them, and they moved without any visible propulsion systems. Any aggressive actions? Not yet, sir, but they're scanning everything they pass. Deep scans, like they're cataloging what they find. Admiral An felt a chill. Fall back to safe distance and maintain observation. Do not engage under any circumstances. Meanwhile, in the ruins of Council space, the political situation had become a nightmare. Warlord Thexmore had conquered 23 star systems using a combination of military force and stolen human technology. The brutal leader commanded a fleet of ships built by enslaved engineers who barely understood the designs they were copying. Chancellor Vexthul no longer controlled anything that could be called a government. The Galactic Council had dissolved, completely when Nexus Prime lost power during the solar storm disaster. Now individual species fought for survival while their civilizations crumbled around them. Ambassador Subin Oh, formerly humanity's chief diplomatic advisor, now served as President Shin's personal consultant on galactic affairs. She brought him daily reports from the chaos outside human space. The casualty estimates have reached 12 billion beings, she said quietly. Entire species are going extinct. The delicate ones lost their homeworld when their climate control systems failed. The reef builders are dying because their ocean cities depend on technology they can't maintain. President Shin looked older than his years. Leading humanity through this crisis had aged him rapidly. Any word from the remaining council members? Daily requests for help. Chancellor Vexthul sent another personal message begging us to return. He's offering complete authority over all council decisions. Too late for that, Subin agreed. The damage was beyond repair. Even if humanity returned tomorrow, it would take decades to rebuild what had been lost. Too many people were dead, too much infrastructure was destroyed, too much knowledge had been lost. But the external threat made everything else seem trivial. Scientist Ji-Hoon-1 had been studying the sensor data from the alien ships. His findings were disturbing. Mr. President, these vessels don't match any known technology. The materials, the power signatures, the propulsion systems, nothing makes sense according to our understanding of physics. How is that possible? Either they've solved scientific problems we haven't even discovered yet, or they use completely different principles of engineering. Based on their size and capabilities, I estimate their civilization is millions of years ahead of ours. President Shin felt the weight of the galaxy's fate settling on his shoulders. Military assessment? Admiral An answered via secure communication. Sir, if these aliens are hostile, we're looking at a potential extinction event. Their smallest ships could probably destroy our entire fleet. What about council forces? What council forces? Most species can barely maintain their own defense fleets. Warlord Thexmore has the largest military in that region, but his ships are poorly maintained copies of human designs. Against this level of technology, they'd last about 5 minutes. The first contact with the alien force came 3 days later. Captain Lee was maintaining his distant observation when the alien ship suddenly changed course. They moved toward his position with impossible speed, crossing light years in minutes. Admiral, Lee reported in a tense voice, they've detected us. I'm trying to withdraw, but they're faster than anything I've ever seen. Admiral An watched the tactical display with growing alarm. The alien ships had surrounded Captain Lee's vessel in seconds, moving in patterns that seemed to ignore basic physics. Captain, do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Try to communicate. I've tried everything, sir. They're not responding to any frequency or protocol. Then the impossible happened. The alien ships simply made Captain Lee's vessel disappear. No explosion, no debris, no energy signature. One moment the resilience was there, the next moment it was gone. Captain Lee, respond, Admiral An called. Captain Lee. Nothing but empty space where a human ship and her crew had been. The alien fleet continued toward the galactic rim as if nothing had happened. That night, President Shin called an emergency meeting of his senior staff. The threat was real, immediate, and probably unstoppable. But they had to try something. Options? He asked. Admiral An was blunt. Military response is suicide. These aliens can make our ships disappear without firing a shot. We need a different approach. Diplomatic? They don't seem interested in communication. Ambassador O had been thinking about the problem from a different angle. What if we're approaching this wrong? What if they're not invaders in the traditional sense? Explain. Think about their behavior. They're scanning everything, cataloging what they find. Captain Lee's ship was studied and then removed. Maybe they're not conquerors. Maybe they're cleaners. Scientist Wan nodded slowly. That would explain the technology gap. If there's some kind of galactic maintenance force, they might have technology designed for reshaping entire star systems. Maintenance of what? The galaxy itself. Think about it. Organic civilizations are chaotic, unpredictable, destructive. What if there's something out there that considers us a contamination to be cleaned up? President Shin felt cold. You're saying they might be here to sterilize the galaxy of organic life. It would explain why they don't communicate. You don't negotiate with bacteria before cleaning a wound. The implications were terrifying. If these aliens viewed organic life as some kind of galactic infection, then every living being in the galaxy was in danger. The political divisions between species suddenly seemed petty and meaningless. How? Long before they reach inhabited systems? Admiral An checked his calculations. Based on their current speed, approximately 6 months to the outer colonies. 1 year to reach the core systems. Can we evacuate? Evacuate to where? If they're targeting organic life, nowhere in the galaxy is safe. President Shin stared out. The window at the stars, each point of light representing billions of lives that might soon be erased. The galaxy that had rejected humanity's help was now facing extinction. And ironically, Humanity might be the only species with the technology and organization to mount any kind of resistance. But even that might not be enough. The next morning brought news that made the situation even worse. Keeper Yilnith, a representative of the mysterious Voidwalker species, arrived at New Terra requesting an urgent meeting with President Shin. The Voidwalkers were ancient, rarely seen, and supposedly wise beyond measure. If they were asking for help, the situation was even more dire than anyone had imagined. President Shin, the ethereal being, said in a voice like distant music, "The harvesters have awakened. Your galaxy is about to be cleansed of all organic life, and we believe humanity may be the key to preventing total extinction." 3 years after walking out of the Galactic Council, President Jaewon Shin faced the hardest decision in human history. The ancient enemy called the Harvesters had begun their systematic extermination of organic life, and desperate delegations from across the galaxy begged humanity for salvation. Keeper Yilnith of the Voidwalkers stood in the emergency council chamber on New Terra, her ethereal form flickering with urgency. "The Harvesters are machines of perfect efficiency," she explained to the assembled human leadership. "They have done this before to other galaxies, other civilizations. They view organic life as chaos that must be eliminated for universal order." Dr. Seong-ho Park, humanities expert on ancient civilizations, had spent weeks studying Voidwalker archives about the Harvesters. His findings were terrifying. "They're not conquerors," he reported. "They're cleaners. They systematically convert organic matter into raw materials for their machine consciousness. Entire star systems are being processed into construction materials. The first Harvester attacks had been devastating. 3 star systems on the galactic rim simply ceased to exist. Their matter converted into massive geometric structures of unknown purpose. The few survivors who escaped reported seeing planets disassembled by swarms of microscopic machines. Grand Admiral Yujin Seo commanded humanity's military response. Her fleet was the most advanced in the galaxy, but even human technology seemed primitive compared to Harvester capabilities. "We've run combat simulations," she reported grimly. "Direct confrontation results in our complete destruction within hours." "What about evacuation?" asked President Shin. "Where would we run?" "They're targeting the entire galaxy. Even if we could evacuate our population, the Harvesters would eventually follow us wherever we went." Chancellor Vexthul had arrived on New Terra 3 days earlier, leading a delegation of the few species that still had functioning governments. The proud reptilian leader who had once dismissed humanity now knelt before President Shin, offering complete surrender of all political authority. "President Shin," Vexthul said, his golden scales dim with despair, "we were wrong. Completely, catastrophically wrong. Humanity was never the problem. You were the solution we were too blind to see. Please save what remains of our civilizations." Similar delegations arrived daily. The insectoid counselor Nalresh brought the last survivors of her species. The crystal being Morhan offered ancient knowledge in exchange for protection. Even General Korthak of the Bruthans swallowed his pride and requested human leadership. But President Shin faced opposition from his own people. Many humans argued that they owed nothing to the species that had cast them out. Admiral Seo presented the military perspective. "Mr. President, we might be able to save humanity by fortifying our territory and letting the rest of the galaxy fall. Our outer rim colonies are far from Harvester operations. We could survive and watch trillions of beings die. They made their choice when they voted us out of the council." President Shin understood the anger. Humanity had given 30 years of service, preventing countless disasters and saving millions of lives, only to be dismissed as aggressive meddlers. The temptation to let the galaxy reap what it had sown was strong, but Dr. Park's research had revealed a crucial weakness in the Harvesters. "They're machines of perfect efficiency," he explained to the War Council. "They've become completely rigid in their thinking. They can adapt to new situations, but only within their programmed parameters. Human creativity, our ability to think outside established patterns, might be the one thing they can't counter." Explain. "They expect organic civilizations to follow predictable patterns: expansion, resource depletion, collapse. They've seen it countless times across multiple galaxies, but humanity doesn't fit their models. We're too adaptable, too innovative, too willing to break rules. Ambassador O had been analyzing harvester tactics. They're using our own infrastructure against us. They turn hyperspace routes into traps, use communication networks to spread their influence, convert orbital habitats into processing centers. It's brilliant because it's efficient, but efficiency requires predictability. If we could make the galaxy chaotic enough, unpredictable enough, we might disrupt their operations. President Shin realized what they were suggesting. You want to use the political collapse against them? Exactly. The harvesters expect organized resistance that they can analyze and counter. Instead, we give them chaos. Broken communication networks that carry false information, failed infrastructure that creates unexpected obstacles, political disorder that makes their target populations impossible to predict. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only one that had any chance of success. President Shin made his decision. We fight, he announced, not because we owe the galaxy anything, but because running away isn't who we are. The final battle took place at the galactic core, where the harvesters had established a massive processing center. Human fleets led a desperate coalition of surviving species in a coordinated attack that seemed doomed from the start, but the humans didn't fight the way the harvesters expected. Instead of organized naval battles, they used guerrilla tactics. Human ships appeared from broken hyperspace routes that should have been impossible to navigate. They used the galaxy's infrastructure failures as weapons, redirecting damaged communication networks to overwhelm harvester systems with false data. The turning point came when human engineers did something that violated every rule of galactic warfare. They deliberately destabilized the galactic core's artificial gravity wells, creating a cascade of spatial distortions that made the region impossible to predict or control. The harvesters, creatures of perfect efficiency, couldn't adapt to such deliberate chaos. Their ships were designed for organized resistance, not for fighting in space where the laws of physics changed every few minutes. Admiral Seo led the final assault personally, taking her flagship through a collapsing hyperspace tunnel that should have destroyed her entire fleet. Instead, she emerged inside the Harvester command structure, where human marines used improvised weapons and tactics that the ancient machines had never encountered. The victory came at enormous cost. 2/3 of the galaxy's population was dead. Entire species had gone extinct. Centuries of civilization lay in ruins. The infrastructure that had connected thousands of worlds was destroyed, but organic life survived. In the aftermath, humanity found itself the undisputed leader of what remained, not through conquest or politics, but through simple competence. They were the only species with the organization, technology, and resources to begin rebuilding. The new galactic government was established with humanity at its center. The surviving species, humbled by catastrophe and grateful for salvation, finally understood what they had lost when they dismissed humanity from the Council. Ambassador O stood in the rebuilt Council chamber on New Terra, addressing representatives of 47 species. Many were different beings than before. The original leaders had died in the chaos, replaced by younger individuals who had witnessed humanity's sacrifice. The old galaxy is gone, she said simply. We can't bring back the dead or rebuild what was destroyed, but we can build something better. Chancellor Vexthul, one of the few original council members to survive, spoke for many when he said, "Humanity saved us from our own pride. We will not make that mistake again." President Shin looked out at the delegates and felt both satisfaction and sadness. Humanity had proven its worth beyond any doubt, but the price had been catastrophic. The galaxy was safe, but it would take generations to heal the wounds caused by 3 years of political stupidity and alien intervention. The final scene showed children of dozens of species playing together in the gardens of New Terra, their laughter mixing in the artificial atmosphere. Human children played alongside young Kaldorians, mechanoids, Bruthans, and others. They spoke multiple languages, shared multiple cultures, and had no memory of the old prejudices that had nearly destroyed everything. These children would inherit a galaxy where humanity's role was not as mediators or junior partners, but as the acknowledged guardians of galactic civilization. The survivors had learned too late that competence and reliability were more valuable than pride and politics. The galaxy was saved, but it would never forget the price of dismissing those who had kept it running. In the end, humanity's greatest triumph was also a reminder of how much can be lost when good people are pushed away by those too proud to admit they need help.